Howdy, folks. Happy Friday. It's All-Star Weekend. We have Kevin Allen here from San Jose. Eck will be joining us any second, and I'm going to start with a little pre-show stuff. And Russ, when it's winter conditions, there are a few things that you have to make sure that you have in your car and your car prepared for. And one is washer fluid. Another one is a brush or a scraper.
Yeah.
And the need for a scraper for me is lessened now because I have a remote car starter and I can turn the car on and turn the heat on beforehand, and by the time I get into the car, it's defrosted. Well, I sort of hit like the grand slam home run of problems as I'm driving back from physical therapy this morning on my knee. It's bright sun. It's 30 to 35 mile an hour winds. So it's, having a little whiteouts occasionally. We had a fresh couple inches of snow. And as I'm driving back on the thruway, I run out of washer fluid. So as my windshield wipers are going, it's getting, opaque.
Yeah.
So I'm lowering my window and looking out because that's the only way I can see. So if you see my face being sort of red and flushed, that's because it's windburn. It
does happen. I'll go so far as to say my big joke with everybody is, and Canadians get mad at me about this, I laugh. Unless you really live in the mountains and stuff, I laugh that they go and get snow tires every year. Like my dad used to do that in the 70s when there wasn't the all-weather tire, right? But ever since the creation of the all-weather tire and front-wheel drive, you don't really need them in most states.
I know people back in the day who put chains on their tires.
Right, which is illegal in New York now. Like you can't, but you used to be able to do it in the 70s. But the idea is in Canada, they all get snow tires, and it's like a big deal, and it's a big money maker too. But really, in a lot of places in Canada, all-weather tires are fine. I've driven through many places, Quebec, Toronto, never had snow tires, never needed them.
And if you don't have a garage to store those tires in, you have to pay someplace to store them and all this stuff. There's also a little video out there, and I'll see if I can find it and retweet it. Somebody on one of the highways out, I think it was the 401 outside of Toronto, where they had the snow on the roof, and they stopped quickly, and all the snow fell on their windshield. And instead of stopping and getting out, and it's the middle of the highway, but it was slow. It was going like 20 kilometers an hour. They're trying to take off this snow with the brush as they're driving.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's idiotic. I mean, my God, what are people thinking?
Well, Mike, you'll be able to relate to this. I know Russ can too, because people on the East get hit with bad weather. But I know Buffalo for sure can relate to this. It's always been my contention that when you live in a winter climate like I do in Michigan or like you do in Buffalo, you're not allowed to offend the winter gods. It's just not allowed. And
True.
I tempted fate this week, and I paid a price for it because I had said to somebody on the phone, a friend of mine, that we were entering in the first real period of cold weather that we had. And I said, I've noticed since I've gotten older that, I never was bothered by cold weather before, but I'm getting to that point where, I just don't want to deal with it. Like, scraping your car and all that, you're going, oh boy, and, we've got all the modern convenience, rear defrost and all that kind of stuff, and still I was complaining. And it got down to 2 below, and this is what happened. As I've said, I think before, people know that in addition to having my home, I have a cottage lake house, which is not uncommon in Michigan and Minnesota, where there's a lot of lakes. And it happens to be midway between my home in Michigan and Chicago. And my son and his family were coming in. My father-in-law passed away, and there was a memorial service, and he was going to stay at my lake house, which is winterized and everything else. And he calls us on a Friday night. He says, Dad, there's no heat in the lake house. Well, it's 2 below zero.
Yeah.
So now we're in a panic. We're going to have to fix that. So lo and behold, we got somebody out to fix the furnace. My son, he ended up coming all the way to Michigan, and it was a motherboard on the furnace. Now, I didn't even know the furnace had a motherboard. I should have known because, it's computerized and all that. And but so paid a few hundred for that. I thought, okay, I paid the price. I offended the winter gods by saying I didn't like dealing with it. But no, I wasn't done. So in my real house, now it's 3 below zero. My wife's standing at the kitchen. I heard her go, uh-oh. And she starts running downstairs. And I went in and locked in, and pipes burst in my home, in my real home.
Jesus.
So we got the water turned off. No damage to the
That's
floor
good.
or everything. We actually had gone through that a few years ago as well. But, we had to have that fixed, and we had to tear down the kitchen a little bit. So that'll have to be repaired. But the moral of the story is, if you live in a winter climate, you're not allowed to offend the winter gods. So I'm sorry, winter gods. Please forgive me. I don't need any more reminders. I love winter conditions. So I want to say that publicly.
Even if you bow to the winter gods, they still screw you in the end because 2 years ago we had a problem with the furnace, and we got it replaced. 2 years, and last week a component on the furnace went, and luckily it was -3 out or whatever, something like that. But we had everything shut, and the heat in the house stayed over 60, and we got it repaired within a day. But nothing should break after 2 years. So winter gods, I hate you.
Imagine if it was your MacBook, Mike. Oh, never mind.
If like one day we just did an entire pre-show and didn't do a show at all, completely,
yeah. Mike, I am so glad that I am thousands of miles away from you. The winter gods, because I can't take any more winter problems. So
you're in.
I don't even know that guy. Winter gods. I do not know that guy. Yeah. I'm watching my hands.
Let's start the show so we can offend the hockey gods.
Wait a second. I've got to bring in something real quick,
okay.
Because I need some advice, because actually this is perfect. We're talking about this because I'm in a fight with my wife, and which is rare. But we're in a fight about a bill that came for our heater, which was just replaced, not replaced, but fixed.
Right.
We have a big house. We have 2 heating units, one for the upstairs, one for the downstairs.
Right.
And they've had all kinds of problems. The air conditioning wasn't working upstairs all summer, which was horrible. But we finally got it. We put motherboards in there. We did everything. We put blowers in there. Both things are fortunately covered because we bought the house. They were still under warranty, which is great. But labor isn't covered, right? So labor can be a lot. And they've got these deals. They come out and they tell you for $300 you don't have to pay any labor. For the year you pay $300, and come and we'll fit and we'll take care. We'll change your filters. You won't worry about anything. Well, I was raised, but my dad was always like, insurance. This kind of insurance is for suckers. You never buy insurance on anything like this. So I'm fine, whatever. My wife's like, yeah, we should get it. I'm like, no. So follow this story. The downstairs unit stops working. The heater stops working. It's very cold. It's like 5 degrees here last weekend. We have a guy come out. He orders. He says, "Oh, you know what it is." Well, first of all, before he comes out, I look on, and there's a little blinking light on there, and it says that the such and such we'll call it the thingamajig, is broken. So I call Peter guy. I'm like, well, yeah, the heater's not working, and it's blinking 3 flashing red lights, followed by 2 green, followed by like a staccato blue, which means, according to this chart, that the thingamajig is not working. He said, okay, all right, we'll have him come out. Well, can you tell him to bring a thingamajig? Because I don't want him going back and forth, and just bring a thingamajig if you got one. No problem. So the guy shows up, and he reeks to high heaven of smoke. Okay, so my wife is horribly allergic to smoke.
Yeah.
So I got to send him away. I'm like, listen, dude, I don't mean to be a pain. I don't want you to lose your job. I'm not going to call you up. But if you come in here smelling like that, my wife will have asthma attacks for a week. So I call up the guy, and they say, oh, this. So then the guy comes back about an hour later and hands me a thing. You got to sign this. I'm like, okay, no problem. And he's like, and it'll be $100. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to pay $100 for you. I didn't even let you inside the house.
Right.
He's like, well, okay, fine. Whatever. So he comes. I send another guy the next day. He doesn't bring a thingamajig with him. He goes downstairs, and he's down there for an hour and a half. Now they're charging me hourly things. And I told him the thingamajig is broken. He comes down there for an hour and a half. Finally comes up and he's like, well, I think the thingamajig is broken. And I'm like, yeah, I know. That's what it's flashing, right? That's why I told you guys to bring one. He's like, well, we have one, but it's across town. Want me to go get it? I'm like, yeah, it's 5 degrees outside. We got to go fix it. Okay. He says, okay. So he takes off. At this point, something happens with my son, and I have to like say, I call his office up and like tell him to come back tomorrow with the thingamajig because I gotta go out right now. So he comes back the next day with another thing. Now with $100 from the first bill, and now $600. And I'm like, what's the $600 for? Well, it's for we had to ship the thingamajig. But that was after I drove to the other place. So all the time he was here, plus the time he was driving, plus the time he drove back, and then when I wasn't here, he was charging me all this as labor.
Yeah.
So now, is this normal? I'm $600.
Well, I mean, he can charge you for the labor for the part to go get it. Like that is legal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
He says not, and by the way, it's not the thingamajig, it's the motherboard. I'm like, well, we just replaced the motherboard. I'm like, yeah, but we have to order the motherboard. So the motherboard comes in, that'll be $250 in shipping for the motherboard and the blower thing, and so now I'm up to $1,200.
Yeah, get a contract with a different place. That's what I say.
Yeah,
and then after all this goes down, it's not the motherboard. They replaced the motherboard, and he's like, you know what? I said, you know what? You should try. I'm like, would you just try taking the thingamajig from the other unit and putting it on that unit because they're the same? I said, that one works. So he says, okay, so replace it. Yeah, that works. I'm like, yeah. So it was a thingamajig the whole time. It was a $15 part, and ends up now. So now they're calling us like to pay a $1,500 bill. And I'm telling my wife, I'm like, I'm not paying a $1,500 bill for something.
Then sue.
Yeah.
So I'm stuck now. So she's like,
go on TV.
She does everything right, so she just pays it.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm mad at her. I'm like, why did you do that? You know, she said, no, we got to do it. I'm like, well, now I'm stuck. I have to sue them. And now I,
Yeah.
And I'm like, so anyway, it's fun, but just a fun story for everyone. I know it.
Oh yeah.
And that's definitely unfair because we had a little bit of a problem. And the guy who came to fix my lake house, he drove all the way out and then he couldn't get in because of the snow. And so he had to leave and turn around, and they didn't try to charge us.
That's
and I had a motherboard put in, and it was I think like $80 for the service call, and it was like $100 and some for the labor, and they just pop out one motherboard, put another one in, and it was like $200 some for the motherboard.
Thanks. I feel a lot better. Well, anyway, thanks. I'm sure that we'll start with the show. Though I have to warn you, I might be a little tired today. I ate a bunch of gummy bears that my son had left on the table that I thought were just gummy bears, but they turned out to be melatonin laced gummy bears. So,
oh my God!
I may have eaten 50 milligrams of gummy bears. Like they're 5 apiece. So if at any point if I just fall flat on my face right now,
so we have to call 911 in your area.
Well, you've fallen before on the show, so
yeah. I mean, I have had a lot of melatonin. I have to warn you before the show. Okay, right?
Let's start the show.
Here we go. Hello, Hockey World. It's Friday, January 25th, 2019.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
Kevin Allen of USA Today.
And I am Eklund, and you're watching the Hockey Buzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday at this time to fill you in on the comings and goings in the hockey world. And we don't have a lot of games right now. We've got an All-Star game coming up. So we've got some fun little things I thought we could get into. And we have Kevin, who is in San Jose, where the weather never changes and there's no seasons at all.
But it was a welcome relief to get out here because, as everyone knows, it's been cold back where we live. It's been pleasant out here. We had the media day last night. It's funny how that has evolved. In the old days, you held it in a banquet room and guys would be kind of standing around and everything. And now we're in an auditorium and there's fans are looking down like it's, the Christians and Lions. It's almost like a Roman Coliseum feel, to it. It was completely different.
I was struck by the reaction yesterday when John Tavares was announced, and apparently the San Jose fans who were pissed off that he didn't take $2 million more a year started booing him, which was I can understand it from Islanders fans because he left there, but I don't understand it from Sharks fans. But
I just kind of thought it was. Kind of just good fun. Like I didn't see it as event, but they made their feelings known. They were unhappy. So
Sure.
I do. My best media day story is, and it may have been the game in Dallas. There's a media session, like Kevin said, it's an hour long. With 10 minutes to go in the media session, Jaromir Jagr comes in through a back door and like stands up on his little area like he's been there the whole time. Myself and a couple people noticed that he got there, and we're like, "You just got here," and he's like, "Yeah, I know." And then so like he just didn't even care. That was the Jagr before he became the nicer Jagr. But literally 10 minutes before the end, he got there, and I don't know if he ever got fined for that or not. But
do we still? They don't have the prospects game anymore, right? Which was kind of fun.
No, they don't have that anymore.
Those guys actually were excited about media days. I remember talking to a few of those guys their first years, and I remember Seth Jones, for example. I had a nice long discussion with him.
I think Joffrey Lupul was a young star MVP.
Yeah. I mean that I liked that game a lot. I thought it was.
Was that while he was on injured reserve, Russ?
No, this is when he was with the Cincinnati Mighty Ducks, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Interesting. I thought yesterday, Steven Stamkos held court and was talking about a wide variety of subjects. Like I asked him about, Tampa Bay Lightning, and some other people did too. But there were some questions about the actual All-Star event. And he said he likes the 3-on-3, but he preferred the East versus West.
Yeah, he's old school. Steven Stamkos is old school.
Yeah, like he just said, there is something about kind of the, that you can sort of relate kind of East versus West, that you're an Eastern Conference guy versus Western Conference guy. And, I don't know that I'd ever heard anybody sort of actually have an opinion about that. You know what I mean?
It's nice that you bring him up, Kev, because like a lot of times we'll always talk about Crosby being the ambassador for the sport. Like Steven Stamkos is there for everything. He's at every event. He loves the game. He has no ego. He's really an amazing guy who gets almost no press based on the fact that he's in Tampa.
Well, and and we talked about this before on the show, but I think that's why, like All-Star games, you have to sort of pay homage to who fans really want to see. And even though Braden Point is having an incredible season, to me, Steven Stamkos goes before Braden Point.
Yeah.
Just because the fans would prefer to see Steven Stamkos. He's just got more currency with the fan base. And, you've got to sort of strike a balance, because you got to bring the young guys up too, because you need to kind of create a spotlight for them. So that's hard to kind of decide who goes. And, in the media, we tend to want to just pick it apart, snub teams and all that, which is ridiculous.
The one critique I heard of the sort of divisional setup is like, okay, Taylor Hall got hurt and was not able to participate in the All-Star game, and they replaced him with Kyle Palmieri, who's having an okay year, but I think there are probably other forwards on other teams in the division that may have been more deserving. But because that was the only New Jersey Devil, they had to take somebody from that team. Now, what if Taylor Hall was the only one who was deserving of an All-Star berth on the Devils?
Yeah, I think you got, don't you? I mean, that tradition has been around for a long time, one from every team. And I think you got to sort of preserve it. And it's not like the end of the world. And oftentimes, when a guy pulls out late, like plans have been made,
why not expand the roster? If you expand the roster, we don't even talk about this.
Yeah. I just think that the problem is they feel like, I think that would be even more hard, is because, a lot of guys want the time off. I was on a flight from, I went through Vegas to get to San Jose. I connected in Vegas, and on my connecting flight, Logan Couture was there. So, he had utilized the start of his break to take a quick trip to, Vegas, and then, kind of was coming back. And I was just thinking, and the players take advantage of every minute of the break. Right. Like, he'd already been somewhere and come back, and we're just starting to break, so.
All right. So I'll give you one more quickie. So when it was the LA All-Star game and it coincided right around the time of the Super Bowl, I stayed over in Vegas for a day. And like Kevin says, everybody wants to take advantage of every minute. So that night I went home after the Super Bowl, and I'm taking a red eye. And who do I see strolling through the airport at 2 a.m? Jaromir Jagr.
Yeah, he never slept, I don't think, on his break ever. Not 1 minute. I just think he went 72 hours.
The one thing about expanding the rosters, Russ, I think the owners probably wouldn't want that for one simple reason. A lot of these players have bonuses in their contracts based on all-star appearances, so it will cost them.
Yeah, it would, but I think it's just more of the players. They want to, get the rest and all that.
I really would feel bad about billionaires having to pay out an extra little.
I know.
It would be horrible.
But do we? I mean, just to go off the whole all-star concept, and there's so many different things we can actually talk about that you guys have already mentioned. Maybe it's melatonin talking, but I find this interesting. So the San Jose thing. First of all, the San Jose fans and Tavares, right? San Jose fans are very intriguing. We lived there for a while. When I was engaged to my wife, I was touring around, and she was living there, so I was sort of stationed there. I would go there a lot. Yeah. And this was when Teemu Selanne was a Shark, and this is when the Sharks were just getting going. And I got to know a lot of Sharks fans, and I still have really good friends there who are Sharks fans who play. Now what's the old Russian goalie there who's
Nabokov.
Yeah, Nabokov is the coach. Nabokov is the coach of my kids, my friend's kids' team. They're one of the best teams in California. They travel around. They just won a tournament in Quebec. So there are diehard hockey fans there, but that family, for example, is from Minnesota. That whole area is a lot of people from other places, right? Like San Jose is still a lot of people from other places. There's a lot of single guys from other places in Silicon Valley. When my wife moved there, she was like, "Wow, if I was single, this would be the place to be single." It's just like, it's crazy, If you're a single woman there, you've got like 10 guys that are all making hundreds of thousands of dollars. Somehow, I won that battle. I think she must have. I think by mentioning that, she probably sped up the clock on it. But anyhow, keep going or something. Yeah, but but the way when it all plays out, that whole area. It's hard to imagine them really getting upset and booing Tavares. Like, I kind of agree with Kevin. It's more of like a fun. They really see it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're unhappy though. I mean, I don't think it was fake. It was,
Yeah,
but especially
I just thought it was fun. Like I didn't.
I think that the fan base is different. I know they're a serious hockey fan base. They've always sold tickets, which is great. And that's why when I put my all-time team together for San Jose, I put Teemu Selanne on that team. And a lot of people kind of were talking about that I shouldn't have put him on there, but I honestly think the team had a lot to do with the early goings of that team.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Becoming the huge success that they were and selling tickets like they always have now. And covering a Stanley Cup final there was a lot of fun. That was definitely, you saw a lot going on there for sure.
Let me ask Kevin a question. Kevin, the news this week has been dominated by the Edmonton Oilers situation, the firing of Peter Chiarelli. Now Keith Gretzky is the interim GM, and they're Bob Nicholson is doing a GM search in the middle of the season, and it sounds like he wants to hire a GM, but I'm not sure if that's realistic or if that's going to be something that they do in the offseason. What's your read on the chaos in Edmonton?
Well, first of all, what a mess it is. And, generally, I always kind of feel that coaches and GMs, coaches more than GMs, but, it's oftentimes it's not their fault kind of what happens, and they end up, kind of paying a price just because it's easier to move out of management for your coach. But in this case, as I wrote in my column, Chiarelli only has himself to blame. Way too many bad deals, and to have Connor McDavid and to make no progress and almost really take a half step backwards. You look at that roster, the roster now, and it's just a mess. So whoever takes this over has a tremendous amount of work to do. Usually, I'm always if I was an owner, I'd be kind of appalled. Every time a guy takes over, he says, "Well, I'm starting over." Well, usually they're not. They just stay there. But in this case, you almost are, with the exception of with Connor McDavid. So saying all that, but I think they'd be better off to wait until the summer and see, who's out there and what's going on, and to draw a deep breath. Why rush into anything?
I will give you a reason why. I think the reason why is under the current regime, and now even with Chiarelli gone, they have not done well in the draft after the first round. They do well in the first round, and after that, it just starts waning for them in the draft, and it's been like that for years. They do need to get a change there going, a change in philosophy. If they go with the same philosophy again and wait on that, Kev, they could have the same results.
I think to me, April on is time enough to prepare for a draft. The way they do it now on almost all teams is, you have a big meeting and everybody hammers it out. Why can't you have that meeting in May?
I mean, you can, and certainly, but guys are out there now, right? If you could give guys a different message of what you're looking for, it could change what happens in April when you hash it out.
Let me get some perspective on the on this. I think that Philadelphia rushed their GM selection. And I've heard in a couple situations. I mean, they knew, they knew Chuck Fletcher was their guy from the beginning. We all kind of knew that right away. And they only interviewed 2 other people. But I think that this is a big, and talking to people involved in that whole process. I mean, this is a big thing to get a GM. This really does take time. This is not something that you should rush. It's very different than a coach because it doesn't affect the immediacy at all. Like, it doesn't affect what happens on the ice at all. It affects a long-term thing. So there's no point in rushing this. Like, there's no point in making this happen right away. Well, I mean, there's some people. I mean, you would think with Nicholson and Hitchcock involved that they're going to go from somebody from Hockey Canada, right? You would really think. I mean, this is a big. I mean, you're talking about 2 of the bigger stars of Hockey Canada, right? I mean, these guys are 2.
Yeah, it's not like Hockey Canada is great every year. They've got their own.
Well, but there's a huge network within Hockey Canada of people, right? That
perhaps, and that's what led to the Yzerman speculation. But I mean, this is the thing I'm concerned at, because a couple different reporters put out lists of the usual suspects in terms of GMs, and I'd say 4 of them who I think are all qualified to be good NHL general managers: Kelly McCrimmon, Mark Hunter, Ron Hextall, who was the GM and Michael Fuda from the LA Kings. All of them, to my mind, fit the same model: draft well, develop well, patience. That right now does not fit the Edmonton Oilers. If you're going to have the influence of the alumni, the Gretzkys and the Lows and the McTavishes and Daryl Cates on wanting to fast forward a rebuild, I think what happened with Hextall in Philadelphia is what's going to happen with one of these guys 3 years down the road in Edmonton. They have to let the GM that they hire actually get rid of some players and build that team. Otherwise, you're throwing away the prime of Connor McDavid's career.
I think the difference with Philly was clearly there was like this heated moment, and so things got rushed a lot.
But it blew up.
It did, and that's why
Edmonton seemed to have blown up from a lack of communication, right? That's the one thing that you're hearing from both Philly and Edmonton, from people I've talked to, that there was a disjoint between Chiarelli and Nicholson.
Well, clearly there was a disjoint because it happened in the interim of the second period of the game, and somebody, a fan from Edmonton, actually messaged me and said, "How does that happen?" And I'm like, in sports, it's really funny because of communication, how things can linger. And it lingered in that game, and it was on a national stage. And I think as it got worse and worse, then all of a sudden it got expedited. But it shouldn't have gotten to that point. We all agree with that.
The thing about it, though, too, as well, is that the job description for a general manager in NHL has changed. Like, you have to be 2 things now. You certainly have to be a man who drafts well, as Hextall does. But also, you have to pay homage to the fact there's parity in this league, and you can get better quicker than you could in the past.
Sure.
And the difference between the top and the bottom just isn't as great. And I thought that Hextall's biggest sin was I thought he drafted really well. He had a good collection of young players, but he didn't act. He wasn't proactive. He should have fixed his goaltending.
Right. Right. There was an obvious thing.
But Edmonton's the opposite.
He didn't do that. And I think that's the issue in Edmonton. And I think if they do pick now and don't see who's available, like, let's just use this as an example. I think a guy who would be a great fit in Edmonton would be Jim Nill. Now, if the Dallas Stars don't make the playoffs, will Jim Nill be fired?
Right.
Well, wouldn't you want him in the mix if you're Edmonton? Because he's a guy who deals with the now and has a history of being able to draft well.
Yeah.
So that's why I say I wouldn't be in any hurry. I mean, you just have to get through a trade deadline, but I think that could be done by consensus. There's enough good hockey guys there that should be able to know who should be dealt at the trade deadline and start moving out.
But then this is where I the problem that I have is like with Hextall, at least with Philly, you could see the tangible prospects there, and it's so much easier for Fletcher to make a trade. For now, with this triumvirate that they have in Edmonton, they don't have that many prospects left because they haven't drafted well.
Right.
So I don't know what they're really going to draw from to trade other than draft picks, which they can't afford to trade either, to be honest.
No, I'm talking about moving veterans. They're not.
I know.
They're not moving any draft picks, or I mean, so yeah. I mean, I just think if the only guys you'd move out are the guys you want off your team if they can even do that.
Okay,
a lot of the guys
that's fine. But if you do that, are you making the playoffs? Probably not.
Well, you're not going to make the playoffs.
But I think they have 3 players. I think
they want to make the playoffs, Ken. That's the other.
I know they do.
Weird message of this whole thing.
Well, that's what's happening in Philly too, right? They have 2 teams that are, Philly's got a way harder chance to make the playoffs than Edmonton does.
Way hard.
But they do have 3 players in there that that I think have serious value, and I think Talbot has value. I do think he's
not serious value. Everybody was offered Talbot.
He'll get you a draft pick back. I mean,
the whole league was offered Cam Talbot this season, and nobody bid on it.
Very different when you get closer to the trade deadline, and teams like Toronto saw what they went through with going down to like no goalies for a while.
Toronto's got a veteran backup guy now. I don't think that they're.
Yeah, I don't think there's a tremendous market.
They would go into the playoffs with. No, we're back. I know. We're right back to the Carter.
Let's not go with the Carter Hart. If Frederick Anderson goes down, they're done. So it doesn't matter.
Right. That's true.
That is true. Yeah.
That's the end of the story. There.
You're not going to trade. You're not going to trade for Sergei Bobrovsky or Cam Talbot as a disaster backup in case Freddie Anderson gets hurt.
It's the NFL backup quarterback article.
Right.
You wouldn't give up. You wouldn't give up a 4th round draft pick.
Okay, let's say it's a 4th round pick. Hold on. But a 4th round pick isn't a lot of value for Talbot.
I'm just saying that there's Toronto.
If it's a 4th round pick, sure.
All right, let's make this a little bit difficult. A 2nd round draft pick.
No, conditional. No. You might get a conditional 2nd if the team signs him. That's what you'll get.
Or if he plays a certain amount of games.
Right.
You'd rather have Hutchinson in goal.
No, I'm saying if Frederick Anderson goes down, or if not Sergei Bobrovsky because they have Korpisalo. If Robin Leonard goes down with the Islanders, those teams are done. They're done. They're not going to win in the playoffs. If Andrei Vasilevsky goes down in Tampa Bay, is Louis Domingue going to carry them to the Stanley Cup Finals? Hell no.
No, but they'll try it. They'll try it.
Of course.
Yeah, you don't resign from the plaubs.
Right, exactly. You'll keep trying.
You might as well just not play the playoffs
Stop, please.
And Grice has been terrible, right? We've talked about that before.
Oh, wait, I'm going to put this in terms you can understand. If Gritty goes out with an injury, there is no replacement for Gritty. That's it. It's over.
let me ask Kev, because you mentioned
you're in
well,
no.
Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying. All right, let's move on.
Okay.
I will never agree with that argument ever because it baffles the mind to me that a team that has Stanley Cup hopes would not take Cam Talbot as their backup for a 2nd round draft pick.
Right, but if they're not going to give you a great amount of assets for him. If you're talking about a 4th round pick, sure, why not? But go ahead. Okay.
Well, I was just going to say, just to add to that, I mean, it's the same argument about Jimmy Howard. I keep reading all these Jimmy Howard, and I talked to a GM who said, everybody should just believe what Kenny Holland's been saying, and that is that he doesn't want to trade him. They want to re-sign him. And the reason why he doesn't is, they really need him next year, number one. But also, all he's going to be able to get is like a 3rd round pick based on what's happening now. And, 3rd round pick, they were nice, last year, but he's kind of moving forward now. And he just as soon, kind of sign him. But now if someone knocks him over with a trade, they would certainly consider.
And here's an example. Tampa, a recent 2nd round pick, Adam Ernie's playing in the NHL. He's got 14 points in 34 games. That's a 2nd pick.
That's really much better than having Domingue. This is not fair. Domingue played well when he's there, so it's tough. It depends on your situation.
They're going to need Adam Ernie down the line.
Okay, but when you talk about Hutchinson, you're talking about a 4th string NHL goalie as their backup on a team that potentially could, I don't know.
Well, they believe in Garrett Sparks. Garrett Sparks is the
backup.
backup.
Many times that they don't believe in Garrett Sparks.
No, I think Kyle Dubas does. I don't think Mike Babcock does, but I think Babcock he believes that Hutchinson can be the backup in a 1 or 2 game scenario. Again, if Anderson gets hurt, if he tears his groin and he's out for the year after the February 25th deadline, they're not winning. They may win a round. They're not winning. So if they can get a veteran goaltender for cheap, they gave up a 5th round pick for Hutchinson. So there is a belief there that he can help, he's played over 100 NHL games. He can play. But he's not a great goaltender. But neither was Dustin Tokarski and the Canadians.
Yeah, I mean, granted, that's true, and I don't know. This is just I've been
we've had this argument so long
out in the playoffs, and you see it. Like the best example I can give maybe is the Flyers run in 2010, where they had situations where goalies went down and Leighton was hurt. They got Boucher for this exact purpose. They had the ability to go to somebody who had some experience, who they could trust, who wasn't necessarily going to win anything, but they got within 2 games of winning a Stanley Cup. So, right. I mean, it's not impossible but if they don't bring Boucher in, they don't get maybe they don't even make the playoffs.
But let's just say this in terms of the Leafs shopping list. It's defense, then it's maybe an extra forward, and then it's goaltending. And they're focusing on those things. I think that's where they're going to go. But Kevin, let me ask you this: we're January 25th right now, so we're 1 month away from the deadline. I've heard varying opinions whether this is going to be a really busy deadline or it's going to, we thought there were going to be a lot of sellers, and now the race in the West is tightening in terms of wild cards. So, I mean, what's your feel a month out? What do you think it's going to be?
Yeah, I think it's a real hard read just for that reason. And, especially now, the Red Wings had a couple of guys that I think everyone was talking about, like Nyquist and Howard. And now it seems like even Nyquist might not be dealt. He's played well with Larkin. There's some thought that they may try to re-sign him now. I've heard that he might want to stay there. So, that takes, him out of there. It doesn't look like Columbus is going to move either. There are 2 guys that were sort of being talked about. So I think it's possible that we might not see as much action. I think, that's a contrast to what I had heard like 2 or 3 weeks ago when everybody thought, oh, yeah, no, there's going to be a lot of guys moving. But
yeah, I mean, Nyquist is an interesting one. I wrote about him today because, it has been assumed, like you said, for almost a year that he would be traded at some point, And yeah, he is having maybe his best NHL season point wise, I guess. He's at 43 points or 50, 43 points, 50 games.
He's doing pretty well. Yeah.
Well, and it's sometimes, in this day of analytics and, they're here to stay and they have a tremendous value, but it's the eye test on Nyquist that's interesting. He makes behind the back passes and suddenly he's playing with Larkin. So, all of a sudden they look more valuable. He's just looked better. But saying all that, I mean, his blemishes are still there, and the Red Wings kind of know them all. Like I don't think it's settled. Like if anybody would offer, and the same thing is true on Howard. If you offered him a deal like a first round pick or a young goalie, because that's the one thing they don't have. They like a lot of their prospects. In net, they being the Red Wings, but they don't have anyone real close. And I think they feel like they're going to contend for a playoff spot next season, and they're going to need a goalie. And everybody likes Howard. That's the other thing too. He's played well for 2 years, 2 or 3 years, and he's a very likable guy. And he would like to stay there, and so all of the above.
I mean, what was the relationship with Nyquist and Babcock? I was trying to look it up basically, and there's some funny stories when you look up Nyquist and Babcock, like the whole Franzen buying Nyquist, Babcock patterned sheets at one point, putting that on Instagram, and then there's another thing that where I guess Babcock sat Nyquist out of a playoff game, and then in his own press conference said I was an idiot for sitting him out of the playoff game. Why did I do that? But what was their actual relationship?
Well, I mean, as a general rule, the Swedes were not Zetterberg, the captain, was not a fan of Babcock's. And so the Swedes in general were not, Babcock people. They just, and it was more not so much. It was just how he presented himself. The Swedish players. And I'm totally generalizing here.
Yeah.
It's wrong because they're all unique individuals. But as a general rule, they like coaches who are a little more even, and they don't like yellers and screamers. And Babcock is confrontational, and that's not really the Swedish style. So,
which is one of the reasons why I think that because there have been some things pop up about why wouldn't the Leafs go after Nicholas Kronwall, and I'm like, that's the same thing. First of all, he's a left shot, not a right shot, although he's played right D. But does he want to play for Babcock again? And I'm probably guessing no, he doesn't.
Well, doesn't want to play for anyone. It's interesting. The one guy, and I remember I actually criticized him for this because I just don't understand it. Remember, Matt Sundin didn't want to be traded. Yeah. He just wanted to ride it out. And
I know that.
and Kronwall, may be the same thing. You may want to finish his career. And look, here's the other thing. I'm sure somebody else has said it too, but nobody has raised the possibility that they may re-sign Kronwall as the extra defenseman for next year. He's another guy that,
Well, speaking of re-signing, and I saw this little note on Twitter. The contract of Pavel Datsyuk runs out in the KHL this year, and he's making comments like he may want to come back to the NHL. Do you think that there's any chance he would come back to Detroit?
Wow. That would be interesting because that's really interesting because obviously fans were mad at him about all this.
And his contract got traded to Arizona, but he would be I think he'd be a UFA. It's already he'd be a UFA, so he could go anywhere. But it would be a comfort zone, obviously, to go back to Detroit. And if they're trying to make the playoffs again,
I would think, and this is just my own speculation, but the fact that they moved on, that it's Larkin's team, they probably wouldn't want any interference with that. I mean, the whole speech that Holland made last week about that Larkin's our bus driver, which by the way, is my favorite quote of the year. Yeah, Jonathan Taves drives the bus in Chicago. Patrice Bergeron drives the bus in Boston, and Dylan Larkin now drives the bus. Love that quote. Yeah, so and that's that's true. And so I would say not that they would just say it's time to move on and. We had our Datsyuk run, and he was a great player. And one of the problems, there's one of the great debates in Detroit is obviously they've held a grudge for a while, and that is that Sergei Fedorov's number is not hanging from the Raptors.
Right. That's true.
I mean, and because
he signed an offer sheet with Carolina?
Well, I think it goes deeper than that. I think there was I think Mike Ilitch was always a very popular owner, and there was a feeling that he disrespected the Ilitch family with the way it was handled. So I think that's part of it. But I think there's a split even within the organization that of whether his number should be retired. I mean, I think there are people who believe they should.
I
remember the whole Eric Ridlock thing in Philly. That was crazy too, right? It's just situations. The people do get over those things eventually.
Yeah. No, for sure. So
with 1 year left on his deal, are they possibly going to keep Mike Green? Shouldn't they trade him?
Yeah, that's another issue too. I mean, the record with Mike Green in the lineup versus not is incredible. Like if you extrapolated their record with Mike Green playing, they would be in the playoff races.
Right.
Like it's that much night and day. Plus, with Cholowski and Hronek there, I think they like having him around. The other thing is Mike Green, likes it in Detroit. He's really kind of found a place there. He's played very well.
But if everybody stays, they're still not going to make the playoffs next year.
Well, that's a fair point. I think they're trying to balance that out. Like, the big difference of these guys are no longer, with the exception of Green. Basically what I'm talking about mostly is Kronwall. But like if he came back, he'd be million defenseman,
Right.
number 7 defenseman.
Right.
That's what I'm talking about. Like he's not penciled in to be in their top 6, but if he just wanted to stay around and be in.
But like having Mike Green is like a team with a closer when you're not going to make the playoffs. Like team,
yeah. Although they think they're going to compete next year, so that's what they think. And
who's going to be in net for them when they compete?
Howard.
It's going to be Howard.
Okay. I mean,
yeah.
The only trade rumor that I heard with Howard that made any sense, and that I heard that and this is when Philadelphia was, and this has to do with what you were talking about, getting a young goalie. Is that the Flyers have Felix Sandstrom in their system, right? Who is more about him, Russ, than I do.
I do.
Swedish goalie, still playing in the Swedish Elite League, I think, right?
Yes.
And a pretty good prospect. Not
He's a good prospect. He is.
Is a young goalie. And obviously I'm sure the Red Wings know all about him because he's playing in the Swedish Elite League. But like that's the one thing I had heard. I heard him, with a pick maybe with. Mm-hmm. With Howard, with like a conditional pick, if they could resign.
And maybe you're right, Kev. You're right, Eck, and maybe Kevin's right. But I'm kind of shocked that if let's just say the Red Wings trade one of those guys, whoever we named, but it's not Green, it's not Howard, whatever. Even if they pick up a good free agent or two, I still don't see them competing next year.
Yeah, well, I mean that's a fair argument because they're younger players that aren't quite there yet. Like. Right. If you look at their team, what they know so far is Bertuzzi can play.
Yes.
Larkin can surely play, and Mantha is going to be like a goal scorer.
Right.
But and Chalowski and Roenick at a young age have been able to come in and at least compete. But both of them, neither one of them are very polished. So they don't know quite really about Rasmussen yet, or. Certainly don't know about Zadina. So they're not, but they can sort of make in their head. They can sort of believe that if everything went well, they'll compete next year. But I don't think all those guys are coming back. I'm just saying they're entertaining it, and they're all. And I think they're not going to bring it back to the prices they're earning now. That's the big thing if they do bring it back. So.
Kev, we talked about some of the mid-season awards yesterday, and I wanted to talk about this one because. And, people can vote the way they want. And I have all the respect for this guy in the world because of the job that he's done over 30 years. But I was stunned on the GM of the Year award that Lou Lamoriello was 3rd place behind Brad Treliving and Doug Wilson. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, Valtteri Filppula, Leo Komarov on an overpriced deal. The one move that he did do that was great, and Eck will dispute this, but signing Robin Leonard to a cheap deal and him having the year that he's having was a phenomenal signing.
I'm not really that at all.
But really, what he lost? I mean, you could say, can you blame him for losing John Tavares? Well, no. If Tavares wanted to go to Toronto, he went. But I don't see where. This award, where him getting voted.
Well, you didn't list his best signing.
Yes, you didn't.
Gratz. That was the.
Well, sure.
And that was, that's sort of been his forte. Is he's been able to identify coaches.
By far his best signing, and and the coach of the year hands down. Yeah,
no, and he does kind of, and you should know this. I mean, he does kind of have an aura. Yes. About him when he shows up with the team, there is sort of a level of confidence and swagger, like that you sort of get to. I think it's fair. I mean, that always with Coach of the Year and GM, I'm glad that I don't have to vote on it because that's always hard because there's usually 4 or 5 or 6 people that could easily be, considered for the award. Cooper has done an incredible job. With Tampa and getting them to the, supposedly to the next level. Did he do a better job than Trotz and on Long Island? Yeah, so.
Well, it's funny because I had voted for one of my top 3 for Gerard Gallant because I think that following up after going to the Cup final and having this team where they are again is a phenomenal job.
Yeah, I agree with you. I
agree. Not getting enough credit for it.
Actually, so one more thing, Kev. So, because you're speaking about the coaches, if the players are going to be similar in Detroit, is Jeff Blashill still going to be there?
Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, I think they would like to keep him because I think they believe he's doing a good job. But one thing that they're going to have to factor in is, especially with a coach, is the fan base. They're getting a little restless.
Yeah.
And the other issue there, at least from the marketing standpoint and the psychology, is the unrest that Steve Yzerman will be available.
Right.
I personally believe that the way it will work out, this is just speculation on my part, but there's logic to it. And that is, you got to factor in that, Marian Ilitch is still involved with the team, and she's a Kenny Holland guy. Right. And you have to factor in that Steve Yzerman, in addition to being Ken Holland's friend, is a very classy guy. Yep. You have to factor in that Steve Yzerman doesn't want to leave Detroit. He wants to be there with his family. He's very sincere about that. That's why he gave the job up. He didn't want to, have a home in two different places. He's not giving up in his home in Detroit. You got to factor in he's 10 years younger than Holland. Yep. So when Holland does leave, he can easily move in and still have 10 good years left. I think Yzerman will come in as a consultant or whatever you want to call it. He'll work with Holland until Holland wants to go elsewhere or just retire or move up and just be senior director of hockey operations. So I think it can be the best of both worlds. I think, Ken Holland, the legendary guy, can stay, and Yzerman will come in and work with the team and just wait his time. So, I mean, Yzerman's still in his 50s. He's got plenty of time to run the Red Wings.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
He might have 70-year-old knees, but he's a 50-year-old guy.
he actually might have 80-year-old knees.
When I look at the Red Wings, and this is something that I kind of did want to bring up as well in general, I feel like the NHL is about to change drastically on who the top teams are. It really, I feel as if, when you just look at the teams that are succeeding, and you can see why Colin says we can compete, because there's a lot of young teams, who aren't ready yet, but who have shown spurts of being really ready, and if they have a half decent goalie, they're tough, like Buffalo, Buffalo, Florida, Detroit, Ottawa, all the teams in their division that aren't in the playoffs right now there's not a huge difference between those teams.
True.
I mean, there's not, and then you go, if you go up into and you throw Montreal in there too, right? Montreal is not, they're over successful now. They've got a good goalie. So at the end of the day, to me, it's like there's good reason to keep Howard around, because if you have a good goalie, and the other teams, of course, you're competing for wild card spots with, Carolina, the Rangers, the Flyers, New Jersey, all these teams are in the same boat. I mean, they're all basically.
But Carolina could get a lot better over the summer. They could.
Yeah, they don't have a number one goaltender, and they have 8 defensemen. So
although Nedeljkovic won his second game in a row,
he looked great, and he looked. I love the quote from him the other day about winning that game, and I'm gonna use this because
he's a funny guy. No, he's a funny kid.
I coach goalies, soccer goalies, at the local travel soccer club here, and I'm always, my main thing is psychologically, teaching them, because that's the biggest part of goaltending. And he had this quote that someone told him growing up to play every game like it was the most important game of his life, so that when he actually played the most important game of his life, it wouldn't matter.
Yeah, it's a good quote.
And that was his quote after his first game in the NHL, and he said that's why I was relaxed and calm. I'm like, that's
actually, he played a great outdoor game in Comerica Park. Actually, he's a good goalie. He's talented. He's been in the USA system. If they go that route, they'll be better than those other teams much quicker, because they're not that far away now. They just have a few glaring spots.
But they're also looking for a GM, and so they're that's why the Edmonton situation. Also, Seattle doesn't have a GM yet, so you really have 3 teams basically without GMs right now,
right?
And a lot of teams out there. And then when you
go ahead,
like watching the Western Conference, and I've been watching a lot of other teams play in the last few weeks. I've been catching a ton of games because I've been up late. And there's something happening in Arizona right now, and I know they're playing better, but it's not just they're climbing in the standings; it's the way they look on the
but
we did talk about them for about 10 minutes the other day.
Yeah,
I have to give Tocchet a ton of credit, because they've lost so many players, and Russ made the point. Ekman Larson got hurt in the last game before the All-Star break. If he goes down, I'm sorry.
I'm not talking about immediate playoffs right now. I'm just talking about where they're going.
Well, yeah,
but they're. I mean, they have a ton of speed. If you watched a little bit of that one of the best games to watch all year was that Arizona San Jose game the other night.
Yeah, I watched some of it.
It was just an incredible hockey game. Yeah. And then you watch Vancouver, and you see where these teams are turning around much quicker than I think people thought. So why would you sit there and say Detroit, doesn't have the ability to do that? And I think that's why I think Holland is right to sit there and say.
Well, if there's an infusion of young, speedy players, yes, then it follows what Arizona's doing and what Vancouver's doing. But as we were just talking about, we're talking about Green over 30, Kronwall closing in on 40. Howard's a veteran guy. They got Thomas Vanek. I mean, you need to change over to the Zadinas and the Mantha's already there and Larkin's already there. But you have to infuse those young players because this is a young players league now. It really is.
I agree, but it's very important to have the Greens and the Cronwalls on your team still. Like that. That's one of the reasons that Edmonton has.
But not too many of them, Mac. And
that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, Toronto has Ron Hainsey and Patrick Marleau. You ask Mike Babcock; those are two of the most important players on that team in terms of leadership. Yep. And but you can't have too many of those guys.
No,
you
can. But do they have too many of them in Detroit?
Well, yeah, they do. Because they, but it's just a matter of, I don't think it would be sinful for them if Cronwall wanted to come back for $1 million and would accept a limited role. I would see no problem with that.
Yeah,
because you have to have those, cheap and expensive players, and he's a popular guy, and so forth. Like that wouldn't be bad. Now, if he wanted to come back and he wanted $2 million, I don't think they would. Well, they just wouldn't do it. And I don't know about Nyquist because you got to create room for guys like Zadina to come up and so forth like that. That I don't think they completely know exactly what they're going to do with him. But I do understand the Howard acquisition because their guys in the system just aren't close enough yet, and they want to be able to compete next season. And I do support Green because I know the value he has. To the young defenseman, and they're going to try to bring, other young defensemen as well along, and he'll be helpful in that regard.
It's really important. I mean, in Philly here, you have you don't really have that old defenseman necessarily, who's helping them get through. I mean,
you have an old defenseman.
You don't want an old one. You just need one with experience. That's all.
It's so important to have the guy like the Luke Richardson guy who comes in, who just comes in and just has that leadership and is solid in his own zone.
Or like a 31-year-old Luke Richardson, not like a 5-year-old one.
I know that's ideal, but we can't get that. Before we get out of here, Russ has some really great points on the draft. We'll get into that too on the.
No, but it's a Jack Adams thing. I think people want to know what our
thing now before we go. The draft, that's awesome. We'll definitely talk about Edmonton's draft, which is drafting history.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you guys did this yesterday.
We'll just say, hey, so for Jack Adams, I'll tell you who I voted. I went Bill Peters 1, Travis Green 2, Claude Julien 3. Mike?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember mine. I know Gerard. I had Gerard Gallant 3rd. I had Barry Trotz 1st, and I think I had Cooper 2nd.
Okay.
I had Trotz 1. I had Cooper 3. I had Peters 2nd.
Okay.
Yep. I am Trotz, Gallant, Peters in that order.
Okay.
Trotz 1st, Gallant 2nd, Peters 3rd.
Pretty much.
I think Travis Green's getting overlooked. I do, because he's really doing a good job.
He really is.
He has no business being where they are.
No, really hard. It's just, the
I know there's a lot of good candidates though.
Now they're in first place. The Vegas Knights are doing something incredible again, which in some ways is even harder to do than the first time around because everyone's you're shooting for them.
And you're taking for granted that Marc-Andre Fleury has played the most games and has the most wins of any goaltender in the league. It's obscene.
Do we want to mention GM of the year real quick?
What was that?
GM of the year?
Sure.
All right. So for GM of the year, I went Brad Treliving, Jason Botterill, and then Lou Lamoriello. Mike, who'd you do?
I had, let's see, I'm doing it by memory because I didn't have it pulled up here. I had Treliving number 1, I had Doug Wilson, and I had Kyle Dubas because Kyle Dubas got the best player in free agency, which was John Tavares.
What about you, Ek? What would you do?
Yeah, I didn't do this yet, so
okay. Well,
it's all right.
I think I would go with Lou again, just similar, just for getting Barry Trotz in, and now what he's going to have to do this summer to keep that team going together.
Yeah, that's going to be hard. Actually, that's a big job.
It's going to be really, really difficult.
But
I guess Kevin had to run.
Yeah,
he just dropped off. I mean, I figured
drop it off. And so we do have to get out of here. But a fun show as always. You guys have anything else before we go?
Nope.
Okay, we hope you we can always report us at patreon.com/hockey, and we hope you've had half as much fun watching it as we have doing it, because that would mean we've had twice as much fun doing it as you have watching it. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will talk to you tomorrow.